one of the latest news on these Ukrainian military affiliated channels. They're talking about Iran is preparing to launch ballistic missile at the territory of Ukraine. And this comes after the Ukrainian attack on Iranian cargo ship.
Mhm.
And first of all, it's so strange to me. Whoever knows the behavior of the Iranian army, Iranian armed forces, I don't believe any imminent attack from Iran, on Ukraine. But looking at what's going on, your understanding of these sort of news coming out of Ukraine on the other issue, the main issue, which is the Ukrainian attack on cargo ship, which was
Well,
supposed to arrive Iran, but it was on its way from Russia to Iran, which was hit by Ukrainians or Ukrainian
yeah,
drone, if I'm not mistaken. Go ahead, John.
yes. Well, just to fill in some background details, the attack that you're speaking of occurred on July 25. The vessel, I believe it was named Anna, was within Russian territorial waters off Astrakhan. The Iranian ambassador to Moscow, Kazem Jalali, has made a somewhat detailed statement to the Russian press in which he said Iran expects, and I'm looking down to get the words right, Iran expects a serious response to the attack from Ukraine on the Iranian vessel in Russian territorial waters in the Caspian on the 25th, which led the drone hit the bridge of the vessel and uh, an Iranian sailor was killed. The Iranian diplomat said that the vessel was 5 kilometers off the coast. It had anchored during a storm, so it wasn't underway. It was sheltering at anchor in territorial waters, and that's what happened. It's not the first time the Ukrainians have hit targets in the Caspian Sea. They also claim to have used drones to attack Russian oil production platforms within the Russian zone of the Caspian Sea. So it's not a first for Ukrainian drones to attack the Caspian Sea. It is a first that it's attacked an Iranian vessel en route between Astrakhan and the Iranian coast. And it comes at a key moment. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the Ukrainians have, to suggest that Iran will retaliate completely misunderstands what the Iranian side has said and what the Russian side has said. There's a really interesting and important difference because the next day, July 26, Foreign Minister Arakchi for Iran telephoned Foreign Minister Lavrov for Russia in Moscow, and the two ministers have given slightly different or significantly different versions of their conversation. Bear in mind what I'm saying here is the Iranian side expects the Russian side to retaliate. Yeah, not the Iranian side will retaliate directly. In the Russian communique, Lavrov says no more than he expressed his sincere condolences in connection with the death of an Iranian sailor in the July 25 attack on an Iran-owned cargo ship, the Arna, which left Astrakhan with a civilian cargo. The foreign minister of Russia said that the foreign minister of Iran thanked the Astrakhan authorities for providing the crew of the attack vessel with assistance. The Iranian side came up with a very different version. On the one hand, the tweeted version from Arakchi was Zelensky, I'm quoting, Zelensky's attacked an Iranian commercial vessel, killing a sailor, a blatant UN Charter violation done at Israel's behest to drag Europe into its war. This is, let's just say, an odd way of putting what's happened. Then, in calls with the European Union Representative Kallas and Lavrov, Arakchi made clear that what the freeloader in Kiev, meaning Zelensky, cannot go unanswered. Then Arakchi did another tweet saying, our defense doctrine is clear, an eye for an eye. Any aggression against Iran will compel a powerful and decisive response. Summing up here, what's going on? In the first place, Ukraine and Iran have had serious differences. If you remember, the Iranian side shot down an aircraft en route between Tehran and Ukraine, killing the passengers on board in what was essentially a case, a mistaken firing during an alert period when Iranian air defense shot the aircraft down. Things have never been good between the countries since then. Second, everybody understands in Kiev and in Moscow that Iranian drones have substantially assisted the Russian side in their operations during the war since 2022, and there's been a share of technology. Let me make a couple of points about the nature of Russian assistance. Zelensky said, by the way, Zelensky's about to meet in 30 minutes, will be at the White House to meet President Trump, and then an hour and a half later, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will be in Washington, will meet Trump. So we're talking against them, so to speak. What Zelensky said was, in comments to the British paper Financial Times over the weekend, was that Russia is providing satellite intelligence, and he's emphasized that's materially assisted Iran in striking US targets. We talked about that a lot last week. Yes, the US is accusing Russia of escalating and enabling Iran to strike US personnel, killing Americans in US bases, CIA bases throughout the Middle East. Now, let me make a very clear point, and I'm reaching for my copy of the Iran-Russia Pact, which was signed in January 2025. Let me point out that Articles 4 and 5 obligate Russia to provide intelligence to Iran. The Article 4 says, in order to enhance national security and confront common threats, the intelligence and security agencies of the contracting parties shall exchange information and experience and increase the level of their cooperation. By exchanging information, there's no doubt that within the working military group of Iran and Russia, since that pact, exchange of intelligence is a requirement. There's no doubt about it. Now, second, the Article 5 of the pact requires that when there is a potential war, attack, or invasion of one or the other party, that the two sides will consult and cooperate in countering common military and security threats of a bilateral and regional nature. Now, that's what the two countries have already signed. That's what President Putin signed with President Pezeshkian almost a year and a half ago. Okay, so there's no doubt about that. On the other hand, when Rubio met with Lavrov, and we talked about this at length last week, it was clear Rubio conveyed Trump's warning that Russia should not assist Iran in targeting and killing Americans. Lavrov replied, we talked emphasizing this last week, that the US is assisting the Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian civilians as well as Russian military targets. And if the US continues, Russia will continue. That looked to be a clear case where Lavrov is assuring Rubio, you escalate against us, we will escalate against you. You kill our people, we kill yours. It can't have been said quite so crudely when Rubio and Lavrov met. Since then, Lavrov appears to walk back the sharpness of that retaliation. So when the attack came on July 25 against the Iranian vessel off Astrahan, we once again have a new case of what is President Putin prepared to do to combat US escalation against Russian energy infrastructure, civilian economy, and so forth. We once again see that when Arakchi says our defense doctrine is clear, eye for eye, does that mean that Russia will retaliate, as the Iranian ambassador said, against Ukrainian targets? What's eye for eye in this war? Now the two wars are linked. The Iran front, the Ukraine front are linked for all the parties: the United States, Ukraine, Russia, and Iran. So we have, as we said last week, a serious test of what retaliation means for President Putin. Is it the same as what Lavrov conveyed to Rubio last week? Is it different or less? Uh, these are all really burning questions. What we've heard in the podcasts is that Russia has clearly stepped up its attacks on Odessa and is trying to cut off the Black Sea as a delivery point for Ukrainian cargoes and as an exit point for Ukrainian exports. However, in cutting off the sea routes, the Russian side cannot obstruct the alternative sea routes through Romania, through the Danube, and through that route into the Ukraine. On the other hand, what we don't see yet is the retaliation I talked of last week, and that's to cut off the land routes into the Ukraine and out of the Ukraine into Poland and into Romania. So what this tanker attack or cargo vessel attack in the Caspian signals is once again the test for President Putin, which in his way, the Iranian ambassador emphasized. What is the serious response of Russia to be now that the two wars and two battlefields have been connected?
John, you've mentioned the two prime minister of Israel and Zelensky. Both of them are going to meet with Donald Trump today. And how do you see these two wars together? Are we going to see the continuation of the war in a way that the two wars somehow going to merge, as Zelensky is trying to do? I don't know if you see some sort of, you know, willingness on the part of Zelensky to do that, because that would hugely help him if he convinces the United States that you can help us, we can attack, the ship, all these shipments from Russia to Iran, and that could be some sort of cooperation between the two. And is that going to be a viable choice for Donald Trump? I don't know your understanding of that. And on the other hand, the case of Benjamin Netanyahu, in my opinion, is more tricky. And as time goes by, the complexity of the issue in the West Asia. We have a new blockade on Saudi Arabia. The Strait is
Yeah.
closed. Bab al Mandab is under tremendous pressure from Yemen. And the United States, it seems that from what we've seen so far, you don't see that much of willingness on the part of Donald Trump to continue the war, because their attacks in the southern part of and in the southern and the western part of Iran, it didn't achieve that much. Looking at the even those people who are so much, I would say, in Iran, there's so much negative about the United States. They say the United States is trying to do this and that. Even with those arguments, you don't see that much of its strategic points being hit by the United States in the southern and the western part of Iran. They don't feel that much of pressure. They somehow feel that they have the escalation dominance as time goes by. They don't need to rush to attack or to go offensively. They're just sitting back and watching what the United States is doing to react. What is your understanding of that?
Well, let's take you've made three separate and valuable points there. Nima, let me take them one by one. Let's just focus very quickly on the meeting that Netanyahu's about to have in the White House at 11 o'clock. As best I can tell, he goes in what the Israeli publication in Washington, Axios, is calling a diminished Bibi arrives for his moment with Trump. I'm reading from the text. Axios is an Israeli propaganda mouthpiece published as an American medium in Washington and patronized by Trump with an Israeli reporter named Barak Ravid. Ravid has been briefed to say from a number of different Israeli sources that Netanyahu needs the meeting to get Trump to endorse Netanyahu for the October election. The October election in Israel is one in which Israeli polls have just appeared. I don't pretend to be an expert on Israel in any other way than we've discussed in the past, but let me just point out the polls because that's a little fresh for our audience. As of now, pardon me, Netanyahu is running neck and neck as Israeli voter preference for prime minister with the former General Staff Chief Gadi Eisenkot, who both are running at approval levels of 38% each. Naftali Bennett, who's another candidate, is running much lower. But prime ministers in Israel are powered by their party seats in the Knesset. Eisenkot's party, a new one, is looking to have, according to the polls, about 23 seats. The Likud party of Netanyahu that would put him or keep him in the prime ministry, about 22 seats, Bennett 14, and then you have a lot of small parties. The smaller the party, the smaller the numbers, the more difficult it is always in Israeli politics to calculate what coalition would be necessary to keep Netanyahu in power, preserve his prime ministry, as distinct from what would put Eisenkot in the prime ministry or Bennett. Now, in that context, that's the context that Axios is saying Netanyahu has arrived. Axios is claiming Netanyahu wanted to come to the White House last week, but was turned down. Trump was busy. Today, he's being fitted in between Zelensky at 9:30 and Lindsey Graham's funeral at apparently 1 o'clock. So Trump is not necessarily going to have significant press opportunity either with Zelensky or with Netanyahu, but let's wait and see. The one who gets a press opportunity is the one that's more favored. The Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and other mouthpieces of administration thinking claim that Zelensky's going to get a warm welcome. Netanyahu, they're not sure. If Netanyahu gets the election endorsement, which Trump has so far been reluctant to give, that's what he came for. Okay, let's say that might be quite enough for the Israelis until the Congress returns to vote on its arms supply and financial support measures, which will come in the fall. Coming back to the Zelensky issue and your question about how the two wars are viewed by the United States. Let's just understand this in terms of the Odyssey blockbuster film that some of our audience may have seen and everybody knows about. The blockbuster film basically represents a interpretation of war in which bloodlust is good if you are the king and if you win your wars and if the gods are on your side. Roughly speaking, that's how Trump thinks. And that's how Trump's tweets show him over the weekend, where he's published a series of tweets showing himself as the king of the world, the protector of the world, the man who crushes Iran. There are several tweets that went out within minutes of each other depicting Trump with his fists on Iran, causing explosions, his feet on top of one of the US stealth bombers, and so forth and so on. Trump has a bloodlust, and he believes that violence is both moral and it works. Now, he has somewhat less primitive but more calculating individuals like Stephen Miller, or like the Joint Chiefs of Staff, like John Radcliffe at the CIA, who calculate how to use Trump's bloodlust and confidence in bloodlust, Odyssey style, in the two permanent wars they want to fight. They want to fight a permanent war against Iran until Iran is destroyed. And I don't see, notwithstanding all the tactical and operational losses the US has suffered, and counterpart losses on the Iranian side, pardon me, I don't see that there's any abandonment of US strategy on that war. Second, they also want to fight such a permanent war against Russia. And what the press boosting Zelensky and Trump both think is that Trump is now committed to permanent war against the Russian economy to destroy it. Now, he did sign, we've said it before, he did sign two pieces of paper. One, the G7 agreement in Evian, France, in the last week of June, I believe it was, committed the G7, so they're the big powers of Europe plus Canada and the United States, to damaging the Russian economy on a permanent basis. That was then repeated in the NATO declaration in Ankara, which Trump also signed, also committing to long-term permanent war against Russia. Now, what we are told by the propaganda organs from London to Frankfurt, Kiev, and Washington and New York is that Trump thinks Zelensky's drone war escalation is a good job. He's doing a good job. That Trump supports that escalation and will continue to finance it and assist it. Well, I think this is answering your question. You have basically a very primitive, bloodlust individual who believes he's king of the world, as it were, and he believes he's winning those wars by a level of violence the other side, whether it's Iran or it's Russia, cannot effectively combat. And he believes that the gods are on his side in Trump's case, as in the Odyssey story. And he believes that the technology of arms, his technology, the greatest in the world, as he keeps tweeting, will prevail and it will have the happy ending that you see in the Odyssey. Remember what the Odyssey film says? A king leaves behind a genocide, erasure of Troy, the enslavement of all its women, leave behind a successful genocide. On his way home, he has some very luxurious and pleasurable R&R. He has sex with Calypso, one of the most beautiful ladies, on the way home, and forgets his wife, who's waiting for him, the Queen Penelope, back in Ithaca. What happens in Ithaca is you have 108 oligarchs. They're called suitors. They want to take power, but they can't take power without marrying the queen. They can't do that without the presumption that Odysseus is dead. Odysseus' son Telemachus is a relatively weak boy. if this begins to sound like modern US politics and modern US war making, it's the way Trump thinks. It's the way Hollywood thinks. Trump thinks. It's the way Hollywood wants Americans to think. So, folks, if you're American and you can see this movie, I strongly suggest you don't. You listen to the podcast and you understand where this bloodlust really ends. It doesn't, it can end but slowly, and it ends with permanent war against the two economies, the two peoples, the two political leaderships, and nothing like the slaughter of the 108 men that ends Odysseus's return, the murder of the slaves who served the suitors during Odysseus's absence, and then the torture and genital mutilation scene, which is in the poem but has been modestly left out of the movie. That level of cruelty, that level of morally justified violence, if you're the king and you're a winner and the gods are on your side, that's the way Trump thinks. Underneath that is the picture MAGA voters who remain highly supportive of that, and the White House technicians who see that though Trump is losing about 1 percentage point approval each week, the problem he faces is inflation. The problem he has to control is the price of oil at the gas tank. But let me add parenthetically one very clear thing.